at 6:30. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Diane, would you like to be the timekeeper?
No, but I will be.
Oh, okay. I think Ben had you slotted for timekeeper for this month. So.
Yeah, he did. So I'm ready.
Okay. All right. Anybody in the audience out there, Scott?
No, sir, there's not.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to item G, approval of the minutes. The draft minutes from October 10th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I make that motion.
I'll second.
Open for discussion. Any comments or change or edits to the meeting minutes?
I had one. I was just looking for it. I thought there was a follow-up that, I think there should have been a follow-up under the 5A that Phil was going to discuss holding a joint bicycle event with the Bike and Ped Committee.
We'll add that.
That's all I had.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, make a motion to, is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Not opposed. Meeting minutes approved for October 10th.
Hey, Ron,
Yeah.
we have two people that are muted. So if they're voting A or nay, you're not going to be able to hear that.
Okay, I thought they raised their hand.
So
okay.
I didn't feel like I should vote on that one because I wasn't at the meeting. So that was part of the reason I was muted.
Okay.
So does that count as the abstention?
Yes.
Okay. So Josh abstains. All right. Let's move on to the next item. Item 4, agenda new business, the draft annual 2022 annual report. Ben, you have an update for us?
Yeah, so in the packet there was the draft 2022 annual report. I can either bring that up now, or if you've all felt like you've had a pretty good chance to look at it or have it right in front of you, we can just kind of discuss some of the things that were included on this, and then go over things that may have been left out, or things that we would like to get added on to this annual report.
Why don't you go ahead and bring it up?
All right, I'll bring this up, and then this will come back onto the agenda in January for a final chance to take a look at it.
Okay.
Did you pull this together, Ben?
What's that?
Did you pull this together?
Yes.
You did a nice job.
Oh, thank you.
It might be easier for us if you just circulate a Word document and we can send it back to you and Ron with any comments.
Okay, yeah, that would be good. It was a little tough with not really being here for the first half of the year, but I think Phil, of course, was around.
Yeah, Phil won't be able to have a chance to look at it, will he?
Right. All right. Can everyone see it here?
Yeah.
I think these were kind of the three big events: the invasive species event, the recycling day, and then annual waterway cleanup. Was there any other events this year that were RCC sponsored?
We had that invasive species.
Okay. I had that as the RCC annual event.
Okay. That's right. All right.
Okay. And that was the one with that Anna Healy presented at. I'm sure we're thinking of the same one.
Yes. Yep,
Yep.
that's it. Sorry.
So only thing I had there, Ben, was to identify where Matt came from. That was SCIP, South Central Basin Partnership.
Okay.
Oh,
Yep. That's something we can add. So with this stormwater and groundwater initiatives, this was kind of a mostly held over from last year with more talk about the USGS Swan Creek monitoring station. Of course, there was the amendment that Gabriella put forward to increase the funding, which will now allow for collection of orthophosphate and nitrate. So that's kind of a new development for that. And then just continuing the partnership with Yahara Wind's adaptive management program, reducing agricultural phosphorus runoff. Added some stuff on here about the some of the recycling initiatives at the Aldo Leopold School, and I think Kim and Chris probably have some things to add on here. I know there was talk at some of the previous RCC meetings about how the program has just been kind of expanding throughout MMSD, and then just some other stuff, the holiday lights. Was there a food waste audit in 22?
Yes,
There was. Okay.
I think so. I didn't.
Yes.
I didn't. It was really cold, right?
Yes, I think we
Yeah.
did two of them. I have to go back and look at my notes, but we can get you the updated information on that.
Okay, great. So some to talk about the idling reduction, the RFP for sustainability. I know Phil, I believe, is going to send out Word copies, I believe, to everyone, just to get a chance to take a look, and then we'll have it up again in January at that meeting. And then just there's the Sustained Dane event at O'Brien Solar Farms that Chris and Phil were instrumental in putting together with Sustained Dane.
do we need to add a date to that?
Yeah, I can add some dates here.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, all the articles, I believe this list should be accurate. In addition to the green e-news blasts that Phil has been sending out.
And then you can add your December article.
Okay.
To that, please.
Yep.
Will do. Yeah, and then just some of the promotional stuff we've done through Fact TV and the Star, of course, advertising the various events that we have for the year. So this subcommittee, from what I understand,
we did have an event. We did have that annual event that we just talked about, the invasive species. So the last sentence under community outreach is not accurate.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Now, is the community outreach subcommittee active? I guess I haven't. We haven't really had any updates from the subcommittee.
Yeah, so we met. We haven't been meeting as much as we have in the past, but we did meet.
Okay.
And whenever we have an event, usually like our big annual event, we'll meet to kind of talk about what we need to do. This last event for the solar farm event, we just kind of did it through email, just because we had a couple of committee members missing.
Got it.
So.
Okay, great. And then just some other kind of activities, groups that people are participating in here. We've got the Green Tier Legacy and Green Tier Clear Waters groups, Sustainable Leaders Collaborative. I think I already mentioned the Yahara Winds, and then Phil and Joshua both on the Dane County Environmental Council. So, I mean, that's just kind of a quick run through of what I kind of gathered as the main I don't know, some of the main activities for the group this year. So I'll pass out a Word document as was suggested, and then can make edits and fill some stuff in. Maybe there's some missing dates.
Yeah, if you could send over the draft document to us to edit, that'd be great.
And again, I think you did a really nice job, especially considering you've only
First
been here
time.
part of the year. Yeah, and your first time through. You did a really nice job.
Yeah.
Well, it's much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, anything else on the annual report?
That's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Ben. We can move on to the next event, item 4B, which is the draft 2023 calendar events. I put that together in collaboration with Ben and Phil before Phil went on his paternity leave. Can you pull that up, Ben? I don't know if everyone had a chance to look at it again. Made some edits, just need to have you folks look at it, provide any comments, suggestions, or things that we might, if I missed out on anything, or things that we want to add. So we have our ongoing yearly efforts, kind of some of the things that we've done in the past. I'm not sure if we have anything else that we need to add there. Although I don't see the waterway cleanup. Oh, there it is. No. Yeah, the waterway cleanup's a yearly event, correct? We've been doing it every year since I've been on the committee.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's listed individually under April.
Okay, do we need to include it up here though?
Well, you could include it under the improve water quality section.
Okay,
I mean, if we wanted to, this calendar of events was originally started to keep us on track so we didn't miss anything and forget anything, rather than be comprehensive of everything that we do, but just to make sure that, for example, we planned ahead for the waterway cleanup, or in the past we've had compost bin sales or things like that. So
yeah.
This whole first section of ongoing yearly efforts originally was just RCC's focus for the next year, and it's just kind of expanded. So, you know, what we include up there is completely up to you or other members.
Okay. I think it's a good reminder of what we're doing every year. So
I didn't realize we were going to work on the stormwater ordinance update. Did I miss that discussion, or is that something new?
Yeah, that was something new. So I threw that on there for a couple of reasons. So one, right now, Dane County, their ordinance for stormwater management supersedes the city's ordinance. There's one requirement in particular, and that's with requiring detention of the 200-year event for developments. And right now our ordinance reads 100-year. So that has been causing some grief and confusion. So I'd just like to get that updated to match the county, as well as getting in some development standards for storm sewer design. So what the expectation is, as far as, you know, the storm sewer can convey the 10-year event, 100-year event all has to be within the right of way, and a 500-year event would have to, you know, just not impact any structure. So there's some kind of language that I think would be nice to include in the ordinance.
Good.
So this year I also, and I think we have some discussions about, maybe, informing those residents that live in multifamily dwellings to try to address with them more of a recycling issues and what they can do within their apartment complex or condominium complex, how to improve recycling in that group. So I thought that might be a good area to focus. I don't know if that was yours, Diane, or Chris's.
Well, actually, that was the community outreach subcommittee, and primarily a member who's not on the commission anymore was kind of the impetus behind that. But I think Chris has mentioned at the last couple of meetings that that would be a good spot for us to work on again.
Okay. That's why what was in there as a focus for next year. And then we just continue working on the dark sky ordinance with Phil. Phil's supposed to be working on it, and then work progress towards completing. I'm not necessarily, we haven't even hired a consultant yet. So progress towards, I don't know if it's completing a sustainability plan. I don't know if that's going to be done in 2023.
Oh, I hope
Yeah.
so. I mean, I think
so?
I think the RFP is going to be going out hopefully in January, and I think, I think we should get, at least for the city part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the timeline, but I thought we were talking about 6 months. So yeah, I'm
Okay.
thinking we'll have it.
Okay. Should that be like phase 1 then, or?
Let's just leave it the way it is. I like that.
Okay. And then the months are broken up. Trying to get Tony Hartman to give a solar presentation in January. Again, the RFP, hopefully it'll come out in January for sustainability plan. You can scroll down, Ben. Let's see. I'm not sure on the annual report to committee of the whole, is that something that we present annually, Diane, or when requested?
Well, we tried in the past, we've tried to do annual because originally we didn't have an alder on the committee. And so we tried to keep the council informed. And then when the council potentially turned over every 2 years with the election cycle, but now that it's staggered terms, and our presentation was kind of late last year, we may not, we should definitely share our annual report, and I think Gabriella can do that, and maybe one of us can be on hand to answer any questions, but I don't know that we necessarily have to do a formal presentation again.
Okay.
Does anybody else have thoughts on that?
This is Chris. Sorry that I don't have a camera tonight and that I was
Hi,
late.
Chris.
But I tend to agree with Diane. We've typically done that presentation every couple of years. If there was a significant change in the council, I think, there might be a reason to go in and present it more so that they know what we're up to. But I think as of right now, let's provide the report and have somebody on hand. Gabriella does a really nice job of representing our thoughts, I think. And, I'm thinking that, we had last done it in 2020, February of 2020. And then we did it, when was it? July of 2022. So about every 2 years seems about the right pace for that, but okay. I think we'll just evaluate it.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Hey, Ben, can you go back to January real quick? In January, I evaluate options for the 2023 annual event. I think there was some discussion, maybe Chris, you had, that we can do maybe more than one annual event a year. And I was thinking maybe if we could, maybe do one in the spring, summer, and fall. I just want to get people's thoughts about that. And I kind of listed some things. One thing I mentioned to Ben and Phil was to do a cycling tour of our stormwater facilities that we have out there, since most of the trails go by a lot of those. So I thought that might be a good event if we could do that sometimes, maybe in the springtime or in the summer. And then do that should be multi-family recycling event. And then bring your own bag event.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any of those are our annual events. I think those are all kind of, community outreach events that we can do. I think still yet to be determined what we actually do as our annual event.
So what distinguishes an annual event from a community outreach event?
Well, for the annual event, we try to pick a topic that we really want to focus in on, that we kind of decide as a commission that we want to be our annual event. So that's typically an event we might put a little bit more of an effort in marketing it. We may extend our marketing to go beyond the city limits and hit some of the greater Madison area. So that's generally, what we've had as the RCC annual event. And then, traditionally we've had more outreach events. And so that kind of came to a halt in 2020, but traditionally we do have, more like, I would say, quarterly events kind of throughout the year where we invite a speaker, to come to the library. I think our goal is to get out and move around. So we may do a multi-recycling event. We talked about maybe doing one at the Boys and Girls Club since it's been 7 or 8 years since we've done that. So, I would say our annual event is something that is a little bit bigger than, our typical quarterly or community outreach events. A bring your own bag event is, there really isn't too much marketing for that at all, besides a few social media posts. And then it's just hitting the people that are happening to be at the grocery store at the time we're there. I don't know if anybody has anything to add to that.
I think what you have listed, Ron, are good, how do we want to call those? Outreach events. Well, two things. April tends to be a really busy month for us because of the stormwater cleanup and the other things that are, recycling day. So I think the soonest we could do any cycling would probably be May and possibly June. So maybe we don't do anything else plan for anything else in spring, but depending on where we are with the dark sky ordinance, last year we talked about making that our annual event and bringing in like the speaker that we had just for our meeting, inviting the public to attend and sort of market it that way to the rest of Fitchburg and get support for it. So that might be something we want to do for an annual event. I think Chris mentioned the food waste event that we tried to do, that we had scheduled for 2020 and had to be canceled because of the pandemic. Is that right, Chris? Wasn't that the topic?
Yeah, no, we had it scheduled, planned, and it was planned for April of 2020, and it was pretty much all set to go. And we were a month out when everything kind of shut down. So, I wouldn't mind circling back to that. I'm sure Promega would be willing to host an event like that at their auditorium. So just another venue that we could use for an event. So that could be a consideration if we're not quite there with Dark Sky. Dark Sky could be more of a fall, event. I still think, that we could possibly have a, speaker at like a library, if we wanted to cover a topic in, say, February of this year, to kind of hit something in the winter months. That could be an option. So I think there's plenty of options and flexibility. I think, we really just kind of want to start to nail some of those down. This is just kind of more of a general brainstorming for next year, but I think we want to nail down and maybe assign specific events and specific times for some of those events so that we can start planning them and make sure we hold ourselves to having those events.
Okay. So I'm just looking at the calendar here. So at some point, I guess we need to have that defined by like February, for the February meeting.
Well, I mean, I think in January,
We'll finish in March, finish planning for the annual event. So,
right. I
Okay,
mean, we have some kind of general reminders in there. Some of the bullets you'll see maybe
Yeah.
tied to like a previous event, like I think, I always like, kind of coming in fresh, in January. And maybe we don't have a December meeting, do we?
No,
no,
Okay. So, I guess it would be nice to, I know this is, if we would like to have like an event in February, would that be something people would be interested in?
I think that would be nice, except we don't have a December meeting, so we don't have a lot of time to pull it together. I mean,
yeah,
we would need to have I think we would need to have a topic now, and then, so we can contact, or maybe not. Chris, you've done more of this planning than I have, but is it possible that we could pull this together at a January meeting? We also have a speaker at our January meeting.
It is possible.
Well,
I
then,
think
then let's try it.
I mean, February would be a good month. There's so much other stuff that's quiet. We're going to be competing against so little that we think we could do it. I think we might actually get better turnout than a lot of the other times of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I guess off the top of my head, one of the ideas would be, having somebody talk about the groundwater. We're hearing about it now. We could have something more of a public outreach on that in February. If we think that might be a good idea, we could have that as follow-up maybe to that discussion if we think that this is something that we think the public would like to hear about.
okay, particularly, I think if there's a focus around maybe, I don't know, PFAS and those chemicals, because I'm just hearing recently that there's potentially some groundwater wells that are within Fitchburg and outside of Fitchburg that have been found contaminated with PFAS. So might be interesting to get maybe somebody from the public health department to come talk about what's going on with our groundwater wells, particularly this, the PFAS contamination. Because it looks like that this PFAS contamination in the groundwater wells between, I guess, city limits Fitchburg and Lake Wabisa is not really related to the Starkweather Creek releases or contamination. So it's potentially coming from somewhere else. But we don't know
That's a
yet.
good idea. Yeah, I think that topic we could hash that out a little bit. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, I wouldn't mind. I could work with you, Ben, on that to find it, to work with somebody at public health to talk about that.
Well, Ron, this is something where, the community outreach. So Kim and myself and Sharon Hanrahan can take that on, and,
Okay,
I don't want you to feel obligated to take that on. That's
yeah,
part of our role is to find those speakers and then bring it back and present
Okay.
that to the commission. So we kind of do some legwork on that. In between, there may be a email here or there to give an update, or
okay. I'm okay with that.
so. I don't want that to necessarily be on you and Ben to get that done.
Okay,
Good idea, though. I think we should definitely pursue that.
yeah,
If we're going to have a speaker or speakers on that, maybe think about including the monitoring station. I think maybe a lot of people don't know that we even have that and why we're doing it.
yeah,
Yeah, and I do think the topics of chloride and phosphorus are always important with, how they're affecting our surface waters. We're built on an area of lakes being of utmost importance with our recreation, and chloride and phosphorus are two of the biggest things that we're dealing with, big picture wise. So I think it's important to hit those things as well, and have people walking away with some things that they can do maybe better in their own personal venues.
I think being a semi-rural community, nitrate presence in wells is another big one.
yeah.
Agreed. I mean, you can hit a lot of different things, lead and arsenic, are common, background. Some people have lead in their wells, and sometimes it's old piping. So there's a lot of, there's you know, a handful of things, and it wouldn't be bad to kind of hit, you know, all of those things that are, you know, most likely to be potential concerns of people with their water quality.
What came
Yeah.
from the ask for the local contact to come speak on it? Because I think there's definitely, I mean, Chris, you keep bridging into, I think, local considerations, right? Like, what I think there's going to be a lot of questions about what is the state of lead piping in Fitchburg? What's the, you know, how often are we testing, right? And so I think, is somebody from public health going to be able to cover all that, or should we be coupling this with somebody from the water utility in the Fitchburg area as well?
Yeah, I mean, we might need to have a couple of speakers. So sometimes at these events, if we're trying to cover a variety of topics and, you know, one speaker we're talking to doesn't feel like they have, you know, all of that in their kind of realm of expertise, then we'll have, you know, sometimes two, sometimes we've had 3 or 4 speakers, depending on what we needed to cover kind of the ground on a topic. But, you know, I do think it would be an interesting topic. You know, we used to have these events more frequently at the library, and these are things that people like to hear about, and we've had good attendance at these events in the past.
Chris, have you had in the past, any of these outreach meetings, done anything with homeowners and BMPs, best management practices for stormwater? To me,
No,
that's
we really
like a
haven't.
good one to have.
We haven't really done.
Would you mean like rain gardens?
Yeah, rain
Or-
gardens or other things that a homeowner could do in their yard to help control or you know, manage stormwater, you know, to some extent, manage stormwater.
Yeah, that's a possibility. You know, I think stormwater, you know, is probably its own topic. You know, water quality is, you know, there's obviously we've hit a lot of different potential contaminants and concerns and topics within water quality itself, from groundwater quality. You know, now stormwater quality can be tied to that with infiltration, you know, certainly, but I feel like stormwater may be, you know, maybe a separate topic or a separate event.
I was thinking, one of the suggestions you have, Ron, is a cycling tour of stormwater control practices.
Yeah,
That could include rain gardens and
yeah,
rain barrels,
yep,
and that could all be wrapped up in. So it's showing people not only what the city is doing, but what they can do on their own property.
yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that. Okay.
I noticed
So-
under
Oh.
January, you have select dates for the e-cycle shred event. Don't we have that scheduled already?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we can revise that.
When is that? Do you know, Ben? When? I know it's in April, but I don't remember.
Let me see here.
So we can take out a recycling.
Ron, I would say that maybe we move that more to October just as a trigger to remember to do that. You know, in the past, that used to be like we could plan it and, you know, have that discussion in January and have somebody for
Yeah,
April. But now it's more like at the 6 months cycle for planning those things out.
We still need the waterway cleanup scheduling in January, but
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
e-cycle, I think we should do earlier.
Yep.
so October we have, we say fall e-cycling shred and med drop event. So we need to say also add planning for spring.
Select a spring date. Do you think that works, Ben? Because this year, I think you selected the fall and the spring date at the same time.
Yes, April 29th and September 16th are the dates.
And so what was the other, Ben?
April 29 and September 16.
So how far in advance are you thinking we need to schedule that?
Well, with the vendors, or
Yes.
Yeah,
That's who we scheduled with. Yeah, they gave us some dates and we selected the April 16th date and the September 6th or April 29th and September 16th date from some of the options that were provided for us to choose from.
Well, what I meant was for next year, when we're planning for the following year, when should we talk about, like, when did you get these dates?
Yeah, pretty much right after the event, so it was in October.
Okay. So we'll add a bullet under October for the plan for the recycling and shred event.
Yeah, you could do September or October. So I think
2024.
we'll probably plan it after the fall event is over. So sometime in September. I can go down to some later.
We only have 6 minutes left on this.
Okay. So wanted to, I guess, point out some main things. In May, I'd like to have Todd Suttonbreck from the USGS come give us a presentation about the Swan Creek Laundry Station. It'd be nice to see what the data is showing. Kind of give us an idea what the loadings look like in Swan Creek with nutrients. So I thought that'd be good to have him to give a presentation in May.
Yeah, and we can have that in May or really at any time in the spring. I know he's aware that we're gonna be looking for a little presentation, and he was just working with his staff to wrap up the report for the water year. So pretty much anytime in the beginning of 23, we could have Todd stop by.
Okay, and then in July we had kind of discussion on the stormwater ordinance update and the Rock River TMDL water quality modeling update. Is that something that will be done by you, Ben, or would it be by the consultant? Or
yeah, so it's currently AECOM is working on updating the WindSlam model. The WindSlam model is the sediment loading model that the city uses. So it's basically a citywide update, looking at all the drainage conditions and BMPs throughout the city, and basically determining, how the city's doing at reducing their sediment and phosphorus loads in the Rock River TMDL. So, that process is underway. It's a lot of work. But I think by July there'll be some good stuff to bring to the meeting for updates.
okay, yeah, that'll be great.
If we do under June, maybe you can send a Word document out on this one too, but if we have a BYOB event in June, which stands for Bring Your Own Bag, that we won't, I don't think we need another Green Thursday event. The last bullet says planning summer Green Thursday event.
Got it. I did add a few more in. I guess I think, could a Green Thursday event be as simple as just having a speaker as a library or come to the library? I guess that was my thought. I mean, I wouldn't have, I'd be willing to kind of champion the Green Thursday if, it's just kind of bringing in some speakers. I thought, once a quarter or something would be okay. For a year, that seems reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great. The problem is, well, Chris, you can speak to this because the committee has to do the marketing part of it. But if you want any kind of turnout, Ben, then we post flyers and the coordinating between. Although the BYOB event doesn't take a lot of time, I think we might be spreading volunteer time too thinly.
Got it.
Chris, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't necessarily, we had kind of already talked about having a summer event, so I think, that event's looking to, or in June, that Bullet's looking to plan that event. We can have speakers at the library. We kind of like to get out and about, and do different things. And so, we did the invasive species last year. We did tree diversity the year before, and those were at two separate Fitchburg community parks. So again, part of our plan is to try to get around the different spots in the community. The Fitchburg library is a nice meetings place, and we've had a lot of really nice events there. But I think one of our goals is to try to, get out and connect with different parts of the community, to try to connect with different people, and maybe not necessarily the same group of people, each time, just coming to the library for these events. While it's nice sometimes to build a brand, I think part of our goal at this point is to also hit more diverse parts of our community.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think we could, it could be an event at the library, at that time, but, my preference would be, maybe doing like an old event that we've had some success with in the past, like build a bat house and do it in some part of Fitchburg where we haven't had an event before, and making an outdoor event.
Sure.
We had a really cool bat house making event in the past, and that was, I want to say that's 10 years ago now, or over 10 years ago. And so, we could definitely do something like that again, and just pick, and last time actually we did it at Key Farms Park. That was a nice location for it. So we haven't done an event there since. So, that could be a summer idea. And it could be, July or August, and we just kind of weigh that with kind of when a BYOB event might be. And like Diane said, just trying to spread out volunteer time a little bit amongst our group.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, one thing I mentioned for a potential event, Chris, was doing something on the lines of like the hybrid, being the e-cars that was done last year, to do something for e-bikes, like, so you want to buy an e-bike, what do you need to know? Have somebody come in for maybe like to do Fitchburg cycle, or what's it called now?
Wheel
Something
and
different.
sprocket.
Yeah, Wheel and Sprocket. Have somebody come in and give a presentation, or from Trek, to talk about the pros and cons of an electric bicycle. Because I'm sure people have a lot of questions about them. Should I buy one? Is it worthwhile to buy one?
Yeah,
what do they cost?
I think these are all good ideas, and I think we kind of work, try to, we have this idea for a water event potentially in February. We can start working on that, because we won't see each other again until January. So there might be a little bit of work going on with that, but maybe we can nail down and take kind of these ideas and kind of talk about it as a commission as to which ones we want to do and when we want to do them when we get into January. And if anybody has any other ideas that they want to share, can talk about it, in January. But I think these are all good ideas. In the past, Ron, we've had an event at that actual bike shop, and we talked about winter biking. So that was a past event. So, in that case, we had the event at the bike shop. So, I think there's plenty of ideas, and, if we're just flowing with ideas and we really want to pull it off, we can do, more events than 4, but I think 4 would be a nice goal to have for next year, just to get back into doing it, because we've been at 1 a year the past 3, essentially, or actually the last 2 coming out of COVID.
Okay, so I'll update. I'll put do my edits to the calendar. I'll put that for January discussion. All right, so stay on schedule here. Well, Ben, if you could send this out to everyone provide any comments or feedback on it, and get it back to Ben.
Yep, I'll shoot this out in an email following the meeting. And
yeah, thanks for everyone's input on that. It was very valuable. Okay, next on the item on the agenda, 4C, EPA community grant update. Ben?
Yeah, so this is just an update. I think it was a year ago. the city applied for a grant from the EPA for some stormwater projects. I believe there were 5 projects identified that the city was looking to get funding for. Those projects were the Lake Barney project, which is the south portion of the city. There's the Lake Barney, which has really in like 16, 17, 18, water level got up pretty high. They were looking at draining it out and being able to manage the water level. So there was some work with the Village of Oregon to kind of get a plan together, see what would need to be done to control that water level. And it kind of just ended at the preliminary planning phases, if you will. So that was one project to finish up and get construction done on. Now that one did run into some issues in the Village of Oregon, just with they had to make certain downstream improvements before they could accept additional water coming out from Lake Barney. So there's really not much at the moment that we're doing with that project. There's the Lacey Seminole Infiltration Basin, which is, if you know, the big Sub-Zero kettle off of Sub-Zero Parkway. You know, that's had to be, it's been pumped down. I think in 2020 it was pumped down. Again, it's a kettle, so there's no natural outlet. So the only way the water gets out is it either evaporates or infiltrates. It's not really infiltrating. So there was some groundwater monitoring studying done and some drainage studies completed over the past couple of years that looked at the potential of locating an infiltration basin just to the southeast of the Sub-Zero kettle. And the idea would be that we pump the water out of the Sub-Zero kettle and then into the infiltration basin. So they did a lot of looking to see if, you know, there was a concern that the water would just go into the infiltration basin and then just get sucked back into the kettle. So that we looked at all sorts of those things. That's another project that some of this funding could be used for. There was the Curry Court and Indian Trail project, which was the one looking at, I think there was talk of a lift station to pump water out from Curry Court. That didn't go over so well. And then there was looking at basically constructing an open channel from the east end of Curry Court down to Swan Creek, which, you know, the study kind of showed that doing that would only really provide little, if any, benefit. So that's not one, you know, we're really not necessarily looking to pursue with this funding right now. And the big one is Goose Lake and Fitchburg Road. You know, that Fitchburg Road floods with some frequency, and when it does, the water usually stays there for quite some time. So there was a study completed last year that looked at some modifications to the Goose Lake outlet into the Dane County wetlands, and then some modifications, you know, just opening up some channels through the Dane County wetlands and providing a positive drainage path to Badger Mill Creek. So the study revealed that really just a few modifications, increasing the culvert size of the two. There's 2 culverts that Goose Lake drains out of into the wetlands. So one of the main components would be increasing the size of those culverts and also lowering them, so the water in Goose Lake wouldn't get up so high before it exits into the Dane County wetlands. And then in the Dane County wetlands, there'd be a couple basically just open channel scrapes. There's a couple areas that are high that the water wants to go over, but it just can't. So it'll be kind of providing an outflow into Badger Mill Creek. So that's a project that, the studying, there's been a couple studies really in this area, and they all show some pretty good results when the focus is to reduce the tailwater condition that Goose Lake is causing. So I think that's kind of,
That's the Badfish Creek, right? Not Badger Mill Creek's in Verona.
it's the Badger Mill Creek. The Badfish Creek is Lake Barney. So Lake Barney would drain to the it is in Verona. So this project is really in Verona. Yep.
The
So
Goose Lake project?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the reason that Fitchburg, or part of the reason that Fitchburg is just, it has to do with the downstream conditions. And this is something that the city's been working with the town of Verona and their engineer, Chris Barnes. And it is kind of a joint project between the two municipalities. But I think this would be the project we'd be looking to complete with the funding. When you're using federal dollars, there's always a lot more just hoops and reporting and administration, and there's just kind of more administrative work involved when you're using federal dollars. So I think what we would like to do, since I think it's $800,000 plus or minus that we're eligible to receive. I think $800,000 really is only going to go as far as one or two projects if we use it for construction versus design. And I think the thought is that using it all on a single or two projects is going to be the most efficient use of staff time. So that's kind of the thought right now. Basically, there's another application process where the city would submit, a work plan for the project that they want to request the funding for. And there's no obligation, for the city to go and do the projects that were originally included in the grant application. So we were basically told that if it's a stormwater resiliency project, the city can use the grant funding for the project.
Then of the four projects that you've mentioned, which ones are you planning on using the funding for?
Right now, I think the thought would be Goose Lake, because it's the project where we feel most comfortable with the recommended design solution. We feel that it's going to provide good results, and Fitchburg flooding's been a problem for a long time. So that would be really the first idea. Yeah, there's Badger Mill Creek right there.
Right here, yeah. So you're talking about the drainage flowing this way.
Yep.
Okay.
So you would use all of it on Goose Lake?
Probably. Well, it would either be all on Goose Lake or all on that. I'm not exactly sure how much Goose Lake is gonna run. I think it'll be split between probably two projects. I don't think Goose Lake will be, because it's a 20% match as well. So the city and the town will have to fund the remaining 20%. So yeah, it's not going to be $1 million. I don't think that looks like $1 million project. So it'd probably be two projects.
What are we going to do about, I realize that Lake Barney involves the town of Oregon having to do some work, but how are we going to help that situation? And the Curry Court situation, it doesn't sound like any of the proposals were either acceptable to the city or to the residents. So where does that leave them?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough situation there. It just is really flat. A lot of the properties that were getting affected by the flooding, I'm just thinking of one in particular. There's that it's that multi-unit kind of, it's the furthest multi-unit on the north side of Curry Court on the far east side. You know, that property is so low. It didn't seem like the math was even going to work out. I mean, there's not enough grade between, you know, where they are and Swan Creek. So the solution that had the best chance of working was digging that ditch, basically from the south side of Curry Court to Swan Creek. And that, you know, that wouldn't be cheap. But it really just didn't provide, I guess, what we thought it would. And again, that's due to just how flat it is there. Yeah, and that one house on the north side to the right there. I think it'd probably be more economical just to raise it.
This one right here.
Yeah.
So what are we doing for that area?
Well, it's, I guess, a work in progress. I was out earlier in the year taking some more survey shots down through the western landscape property, just seeing if there's any kind of blockages that was restricting flow out through the culvert and underneath the railroad. So we don't have a solution at this time. I'm not aware of a solution that residents and the city feel comfortable about. So it's still a work in progress, unfortunately.
And on Lake Barney, do we just have to wait for the town of Oregon to do something? Oh, wow.
More or less, yeah. We can't. So if any, the water has to go through Lerner Conservation Park, which is a park in the village of Oregon. And right now there's no conveyance channel in that park. It's just kind of, well, it's all wetland, but it's been kind of flooded, and they have to dig a channel through it, as well as, you know, dig a channel through the Alpine Dairy land. And if I recall correctly, the Alpine Dairy owners, I don't think they wanted to get a wetland delineation on their property. So there's, yeah, just some work in the village that needs to get sorted before we can really move on that project.
Boy, that's disappointing. Well, you can only do what you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't push more water without having a place for it to go.
Oh, yeah. All right. Anything else, Ben? Thank you. If not, thank you.
That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Hopefully we've got Ken. Yep.
I see Ken's on there. You want to go ahead and introduce him? So we'll go on to the next item, item 5A under old business, local hydrology presentation by Ken Bradbury. And Ben, you want to go ahead and introduce Ken? Hey, Ken.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. So
Can you hear me?
Yep.
yes.
Okay, good.
So super excited to have Ken Bradbury here. He's an expert in groundwater, specifically Dane County. He's done a lot of work with, I think, virus transfer, really a lot of cool stuff. I know he knows more about the hydrogeology in Dane County than just about anyone. So lucky to have him here, and really excited to see what he's got to share with us.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if I can share my screen. Let's see. I guess I can. Let me just make sure I get to the right screen here. Always a challenge. Oops.
There we go.
Are you seeing the slide now?
Yep,
Yep.
Yep.
Full screen?
yep.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, thank you for inviting me. I wasn't quite sure what you wanted to hear about, so I'm just going to give a kind of an overview of the hydrogeology of the Fitchburg area. I've heard about Lake Barney and Goose Lake and everything, and I'm not going to talk about those. But if at the end, if you have questions, I could try to talk about those to some point. Okay.
Where's that cut at, Ken?
Oh, that's behind
So behind Ivy?
yeah, behind Target and Hy-Vee.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
thought. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Now, did my slide change?
Nope, I still see the first slide.
Still see, oh, okay. Still got something screwed up here. Let me see.
There we go.
There
Oops.
you go.
But it's not full screen, is it?
There it is.
Okay, are you seeing the full screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So you're seeing a map of Dane County now.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yes. You think after 2 years of Zooming, we get all this straightened out, but it is what it is. Anyway, so just overview of Dane County, and you guys probably know most of this, but Fitchburg is mostly in the Yahara River Basin, although we just heard a little bit about things in the Sugar River Basin and the fact that it's kind of a shallow boundary there. So like Badger Mill actually ends up in the Sugar River Basin. But the next slide will be a cross section across the county. Come on here. What? Whoops. This is still not doing what I want it to do. Well, we'll just do it this way. Okay. So if you went from this kind of goes right through the middle of the county, and the idea here is just to give you all an idea of the geology, in case you are not familiar with it. So on the left or west end would be over by Blue Mounds, and on the right would be over by Koshkonong Creek and so forth. And what you see here is just the very simplified geology of the county, and with respect to groundwater. So we're talking about our aquifer systems here. So we have three aquifers here. An aquifer is just the geologic unit that can transmit or contain useful amounts of groundwater. At the surface, we have sand and gravel, mostly deposited by glaciers. Although not very many wells in Dane County are using that aquifer because it's generally fairly shallow. Of course, right at the top, we have lakes. We have Lake Mendota here, and we have creeks, Black Earth Creek and Badfish Creek and so forth. Near the surface, the upper bedrock aquifer are Paleozoic rocks, 3 to 500 million years old. I'll show you a picture of those in a minute. That forms what we call the upper bedrock aquifer. In between this little red unit, this thin unit is called a confining unit or an aquitard. It's composed of a rock called the Eau Claire shale, and it doesn't really produce much water, but it does help to isolate the upper bedrock and this lower Mount Simon or sandstone aquifer. And then below that, we have this very thick, what I've called here the Mount Simon aquifer, or generally we refer to that as the deep sandstone aquifer. And that's the most important aquifer in Dane County and in southern Wisconsin, because that's where, if you see the high capacity well here, that's where most of the wells are getting their water, including the Fitchburg wells. And then below all that, we have Precambrian crystalline rock. And this would be rock like granite or gneiss or quartzite, kinds of rocks that you might see at the surface in northern Wisconsin, but you don't see them anywhere in the surface in southern Wisconsin. They're just too deep.
Hey, Ken, is the upper bedrock aquifer more where the farmers tap into or the residential
Yes,
drinking water
yeah.
wells?
That's right. Yeah. So I live here down by Oregon. I've got a shallow well, or it goes into this upper bedrock. So yeah, that's right.
Okay,
But it doesn't usually yield enough for a high capacity or municipal well.
okay,
Okay, so the next slide is this is actually one of the Fitchburg wells. This is Fitchburg well 9. I know Fitchburg well 9 was, and that's the one by the fire station, and I don't know if that's even still there. But because I know there were some issues with it, so this is an old slide I had. But this gives you a real picture of what's below Fitchburg. So this is a well construction diagram, and there's some geophysical information here. But I wanted to just show you that this is a typical high capacity well. It is one of the Fitchburg wells, and it's something like 970 feet deep, pretty deep. And it's this here shows the casing. So the casing, which is the steel pipe that surrounds the well, goes down to something like 450 feet. And below that, it's open hole. And here I've got just the formations, and I've laid them out here on the left. That well is just in generally, very generally hitting. There's about 200 feet of what's called quaternary here, or that's sand and gravel and clay, not producing much water. Then it hits this upper bedrock aquifer, although most of that is cased off. And that includes a couple of different formations. There's some Tunnel City Group, which is sandstone and dolomite. And then there's the Waniwak, which is sandstone. Then we have this aquitar, this Eau Claire shale, which is hit at around 450 feet. And below that, from 500 feet to 970, it's all sandstone. And so that's called the lower bedrock or sandstone aquifer. And one of the interesting things, this geophysical log is something that we did at the survey on that particular well, where we measured a lot of things in the well. And one of the things we measured was flow in the wellbore. And what we see here is what says heat pulse flow meter and spinner flow meter. And those are just different tools that we use. But the bottom line is that water was flowing down that well from the upper to the lower aquifer because the well casing wasn't quite deep enough. And that was what's causing some problems with this well. But it's also very typical in Dane County for the water levels in the upper aquifer to be higher than the water levels in the lower aquifer, meaning that there's a hydraulic head gradient going downward. So water wants to move downward in this particular area. So let's just look at the geology, though. You asked about that outcrop. So now let's look at that outcrop. This is the next slide. This is, again, kind of across the street from Hy-Vee and Target there. So this is mostly, obviously this is above the water table, so we can stand there and see it. But this is what the upper aquifer would look like, except it would be saturated with water. A lot of fractures here. This is mostly dolomite and sandstone. Some of it's thick bedded, some of it's thin bedded. And there's enough fractures, enough porosity here that this can produce water in moderate amounts, but not huge amounts. So again, it's not really sufficient for high capacity wells, but it's perfectly sufficient for low capacity domestic wells. But the workhorse aquifer is this next slide, what we call the sandstone aquifer. And here's a picture of it as close at the Wisconsin Dells along the Wisconsin River. It's really pretty hard to see anywhere in Dane County because it's always underground. But that aquifer is very extensive. It covers, almost 2/3 of Wisconsin. It's the same aquifer that's being used over in Waukesha. It's being used over in western Wisconsin. It goes down into Illinois and over into Iowa and Minnesota. So it's very extensive regional aquifer. It's probably one of the best aquifers in the United States or perhaps the world. It's over 1,000 feet thick and very, very, it's just a really great aquifer composed of sandstone that's fairly poorly cemented. So it's quite permeable. One place that you can kind of see what it looks like is if you drive over toward Mount Vernon you've got this rock called Donald Rock, and then there's some, the little park out there has some other outcrops of the sandstone that are poking up above the surface. So if you wanted to see what the sandstone was like without going up to the dells. So the next slide is just reminding us about the water cycle and how all our groundwater starts as precipitation. And then we get rain, or perhaps tomorrow we'll be getting snow on the landscape, and most of that actually runs off. We get about 2/3 of the water runs off, but about maybe 1/3 or 10 inches or so a year soaks in and becomes groundwater recharge, and that then moves into the subsurface. And you can see here, just like my previous slides, we've got a shallow aquifer, a confining layer, and a deep aquifer. And we can have a flow system in both of those. So those little dashed lines are the groundwater flow system. And so groundwater enters at the water table, and then it can flow a short distance. It might end up coming out of a well here, or it can go a long way. And by a long way, I mean a couple of miles, not hundreds of miles, not, just a few miles, and end up in a discharge point, a river or a wetland or a lake, something like that. Or it can keep going and get into the deep aquifer and become more regional groundwater flow. Although even in Wisconsin, even in the deep aquifer, regional groundwater flow only goes a few miles. That's an interesting thing about Wisconsin, that our groundwater flow systems are relatively short, and that's because we have topography here, and we have a lot of lakes and streams and wetlands that are natural discharge places.
Hey, Ken, how does the water get through the confining layer, go from the shallow to the deep?
That's a great question. The confining layer is not impermeable. It is permeable, so water can move through it. It just doesn't move through it very fast. And so if you think of it as like a leaky, kind of a leaky filter or something like that. So it retards the flow, but it doesn't stop the flow. And so although it separates the two aquifers, some of the water can make it through.
So in those areas, like where people are seeing nitrates in their drinking water, that's more in the shallow aquifer area.
Yeah, that's a very good observation. It's the nitrate problems we are getting are mostly in the shallow aquifers. Now, this is important to understand, because I mentioned that there's this downward gradient. And so if that confining layer gets breached by, for example, drilling a hole through it, putting a well through it and not casing that well, which happens more often than I'd like to see, then we have a problem of the shallow aquifer can then more rapidly be leaking down to the deep aquifer, and anything that's in it, nitrates or whatever, can get down there. And that is certainly happening in places. So that's one reason that well construction is a pretty good thing to understand.
Yeah.
So let's just moving along here, just to remind us how groundwater moves. Groundwater moves from higher places on the landscape to lower places on the landscape. So if you can see here, we have a landscape, and across the landscape, groundwater is moving perpendicular to these black lines, which are lines of equal elevation of the water table. But we have to remember that the Earth is three-dimensional. So in fact, below our feet, groundwater is not only moving laterally, but it's also moving up and down. And so it moves under the higher parts of the landscape, which are more groundwater recharge occurs. It tends to have a downward component of flow, not moving exactly vertically, but moving vertically and laterally, but with a downward component. And then when we get to a surface water feature like a stream, we get upward flow into the stream. So that's what's sustaining things like Black Earth Creek, for example, or the Wabisa wetlands and those sorts of things. So it's three-dimensional flow. Now, let's look at this is a simple water table, but the water table contours in our area, of course, are more complicated than that. So here are the water table contours for Dane County. So this would be the elevation of the water table. And this is what we've simulated with our regional groundwater flow model. And so you can see that in the western part of the county, the groundwater water table is very complicated because we have a lot more topography over in the driftless area. In the eastern part of the county, we have less topography, glaciated areas, so the water table contours are a bit smoother. Remember, groundwater is going to be moving from higher to lower elevations, and it's going to go generally perpendicularly to these contour lines. And so you can see that the Madison Lakes are natural discharge areas for shallow groundwater. Now, on the next slide, I've zoomed in to the Fitchburg area, and it's kind of the same map, maybe smoothed out a little bit, but just to show you what the water table looks like around Fitchburg. And you can see I've put a few little arrows here showing directions of flow, and also some other things on here. The red spots are municipal wells. At least they're the municipal wells that were there about 10 years ago, and I made this slide. They may have changed a little now. And then the little water drops are springs. And so we know there are a number of municipal wells, and some of them are Fitchburg's wells, Fitchburg City wells. And then there are a lot of springs, and you all are interested in that. So I know you've probably seen some of these springs. And we have these wetlands, which are really groundwater discharge area. They are there because of groundwater discharge.
So Ken, with regard to springs, where do they originate from? They come up from the deep aquifer, or?
They're a little of each. They can come from the shallow aquifer or the deep aquifer, and often they're kind of mixed. Springs are occurring in low parts of the landscape, and where groundwater is tending to move upward, and where say a stream valley has eroded down into the aquifer. And that's a great question, though. Is it deep, or is it a deep or shallow source? And that often requires a little research because we look at things like water chemistry, water quality, even some isotopic signatures to determine, if we can, the origin of that water. Most of the big springs, like say the ones at the fish hatchery, are really coming out of the deep aquifer, but they have often a shallow component as well. So it's not always obvious which aquifer they're coming from, and sometimes it's mixed.
Okay, thank you.
Ken, when you talk about deeper penetrating wells that aren't necessarily cased fully, right, or offer an infiltration point into that deep aquifer, when are you typically seeing them? I mean, is that just municipal wells that kind of aren't engineered correctly, or what are the instances where you're seeing that typically?
Well, it's often municipal wells or commercial industrial wells that are not cased through the aquitard. And why would they not do that? It's more expensive to put that casing in, and they can get more yield if they leave the well uncased. In other words, if it's uncased, they can get water from both the shallow and the deep aquifers. So they get more yield, and the object of a well is to get water. But in the long run, my advice to people is that's a bad idea. Currently, the DNR does not require the casing to go through the aquitard or the Eau Claire formation. I think that's something that ought to be changed, but it's not up to me, unfortunately. But I always recommend to people who are designing wells that they case through the aquitard, but it's not always done. Even in more recent wells, it's not always done.
Is that something that you've seen local municipalities decide to regulate, though, that they want to see wells in their space cased in that manner?
That's a great question. I don't know. I can't say that I've seen a local municipality do that, and I don't know what what the authority is. They would do that, but it's certainly a good thing to think about. For example, I know there was a recent Verona well that was not cased deeply, and I thought that was a really bad idea. But that's wasn't my decision.
So Ken, is there a place that the general public could get information about these wells? How deep they are, whether they're cased or
Well, I
not?
assume, in Fitchburg, I would think the water utility would have all that information, and like Tracy Foss, she's still there, I think, would know that. The DNR has all the information, although they're a little for security concerns, they're a little reluctant to release a lot of information about locations of municipal wells. Don't get me started on that. I think that's self-defeating myself, but that's been the policy that for worrying about terrorism and so forth. I think it's better if people actually know where their wells are. But I think the best for a citizen of Fitchburg, the best place to find out would be from the water utility. Let's see, let me move ahead here. I just above you, the last map I showed was water levels in the shallow aquifer. Here are pumping and water levels in the deep aquifer, and you can see that because that's a confined aquifer, meaning it has that aquitard above it, it's less influenced by the local topography, and so the contours you see are much smoother. Although they have the same pattern where they're higher in the west and they're lower in the middle of the county, and they're a little higher in the east. But the other thing you see here is all the pumping wells, and I've got this slide was again made a few years ago. So this was the pumping in 2010 in million gallons per day, and the bigger the red spot, the more pumping there was. And you can see that most of the pumping, as you might expect, is centered around Madison. Madison has some very big high capacity wells, but you can see there are some in Fitchburg and there are some in Verona and every little town, Stoughton and Mount Horeb and Sun Prairie and DeForest all have their own wells. And then some of these wells these are not all municipal wells. Some of these are private, commercial wells. But you can see that there is a bit of a cone of depression happening in the center of the county because of these wells. And I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes here. But I can zoom in to the Fitchburg area, same thing as before. And now you can see the contours in the deep aquifer, which are, you see, these are less influenced by the surface water features because they're deep and they're less connected to the surface water features, though you do see a few interesting little divots in these lines, in some of the lines, and that has to do with the local drawdown from pumping wells. Now we have a great tool, and our Dane County groundwater model that I and others worked on, and we published this in 2016, and Fitchburg the city of Fitchburg helped support this model, which is still can still be operated at the survey, and it's still used pretty much all the time to help people understand things. So this is a computer flow model that simulates groundwater flow in the county. On the right is just a couple of examples of the graphics in this. This is showing drawdown in the water table, drawdown in the deep aquifer. This report, by the way, can be it's called Bulletin 110. It's available for free for download from the Geological and Natural History Survey website if anybody wants to see it. I expect that there are some copies at the Fitchburg Library already. I mentioned drawdown, just so you guys understand what drawdown is. Drawdown is what happens when you pump a well, and the water in the well, around the well, is drawn down in a cone. Think of a circular cone around the well, and that's called the cone of depression. And what I've shown here is that wells that are nearby each other. Each well has its own little cone of depression, but when they're pumping at the same time, those intersect, or they run into each other, and that's called well interference or cumulative impact. So you can see that in the top diagram, the two wells, there are two wells, but only one of them is pumping. If only one was pumping at a time, you would get two separate cones of depression. At the bottom, when they're both pumping at the same time, you can see the cone of depression is wider, and it's kind of smoothed out, and it's intersecting both wells. So on the right, pumping causes two things. It causes this drawdown or lowering of groundwater levels near the well. And it causes another thing too. It reduces groundwater flow to nearby surface water features. In other words, if there's groundwater was really coming out of a spring, if you start pumping nearby, it's likely that you'll decrease the flow to the spring or the trout stream or whatever is nearby. And that's certainly happening in Dane County. Now, so based on the groundwater model, this is the drawdown in the Mount Simon aquifer that as it was in around under the 2010 pumping rates. Pumping rates may have changed a bit since then. So what this is a diagram of is the difference from pre-development or the way the groundwater would have looked with no wells and the way it looks now. And you can see that there is this circular pattern of drawdown, and the numbers here represent the change in water levels or hydraulic head in the deep aquifer since early development. And these numbers, they range from 5 feet to 40 or 50 feet. Now these are not big numbers in the sense that the aquifers are like 1,000 feet thick. So there's no danger of running out of water here at all. There's plenty of water. So these are very modest decreases, but they do impact surface water. So the impact here is more to surface water than it is of a danger of running out of water, for example. I just want to make that clear. Plenty of water here. We've got really a vast resource here, but when we use it, we impact it. Now, why do we have this cone of depression? What happens to the water? A good thing to think about is, where does this water go? This is water that was pumped out of all these wells. Where did it end up? It doesn't go back in the ground. Most of it goes down the drain into the sewage treatment plant. It goes either to most of it goes to the Nine Springs plant, where it's treated, and then goes down Badfish Creek. Unless a little bit goes over Verona, water goes back to Badger Mill. But so we have a diversion of water here. We're taking groundwater out of the ground. We're using it, we're getting it dirty, we're cleaning it up, but we're not putting it back on the ground. We're putting it into surface water and sending it down out of the county. That's why there's a cone of depression here, because it's a water imbalance, which is, it's something that's been there a long time. And as long as we're going to be here, we can't do much about it really, but it's just something to understand.
Hey, Ken, when you hear when people talk about re-injection well, what does that mean?
A re-injection well would be one thing that people do that can be done is you take surface water. Say you could take that treated effluent and have an injection well and pump it back into the aquifer. And that's done many places in the world. It's not done in Wisconsin though, because it's generally considered, I think it's generally illegal or against code for good reasons. The idea there is that we want to keep those deep aquifers clean. Mm-hmm. And so the prohibition against underground injection in Wisconsin has been with the idea of we don't want to putting wastewater down into our aquifers. Many other places in the world, they actually inject sewage or untreated waste into deep aquifers to get rid of it. We don't do that here. Mm-hmm. Other places, they inject clean water to try to replenish the aquifer. And in fact, those kinds of things are talked about, although I don't think there are any underground injection projects in Wisconsin at all right now. Mm-hmm.
Ken, understanding that we're kind of pulling down more in the central part of obviously the more densely populated areas, how come there's why are we discharging into creeks like that rather than I guess kind of discharging into the surface water so that we're somewhat compensating for that drawdown?
That's like another great question. Well, the main reason they don't want to put the water back into lakes is frankly phosphorus. Phosphorus, as you probably know, the lakes are super sensitive to phosphorus and eutrophication, and there's way too much phosphorus now. It's really hard to get rid of. And although our sewage treatment plant, MMSD, is very good, phosphorus is a really hard thing to get all out of the waste stream. And so I think that the the reason that it goes into bad fish is to keep the phosphorus out of the lakes and get the phosphorus out of the watershed. Of course, it's going into somebody else's watershed, but is my understanding. That is why that originally was set up that way.
Mm-hmm. And being a biologist, I'm a biologist, and so I'm kind of curious that in the deep aquifer of groundwater, is it free of bacteria and viruses and things like that, or?
Another great question, Ronald. Naturally, probably free, but as Ben mentioned, we have found viruses in the deep aquifer that probably have come from human, obviously, clearly have come from human sources. So historically, what you say is true. There were very little bacteria and probably no viruses. Today, we do have some of that. Not a lot, but some in the deep aquifer. And it's often because of I mentioned this downward flow that we can get, and also these cross-connecting wells that can be pathways.
Mm-hmm.
So let me move ahead, and then we can have questions and discussion. So I mentioned groundwater discharge to surface water features, and again, the model we have is a great tool for quantifying these sorts of things. I know this map has a lot of colors, but it just shows us where groundwater is discharging or leaving lakes and discharging or leaving streams. Take example of Lake Mendota there. And you'll notice that the north side of Lake Mendota, you have red and yellow. And if you look over here, you can see that the red and yellow on the column on the left represent inflow to the groundwater inflow to the lake. But on the south side of the lake, it's blue. And that means groundwater is coming out of the bottom of the lake. And that's because the deep aquifer, as was just pointed out in the last slide, there's a drawdown under the central part of Madison. The groundwater gradient is now reversed there. And so the lakes are leaking outward near the isthmus. And so you can imagine, the last question was, how does stuff get into the groundwater? Well, any stuff in the lake has a potential for getting into that aquifer because we have so much drawdown right in the municipal area. But if you move south to Conganza and Mobisa, you can see those are mostly yellow, so groundwater, and they're outside of the Kona Depression, so groundwater is discharging to those lakes. So there's a lot of nuance here, a lot of interesting things you can glean from studying this kind of diagram. But I'll move on, and we can come back to this if you're interested, because I wanted to finish up with just talking about contributing areas, also called zones of contribution to wells. So often municipalities or anybody wants to know where the water is coming from for their particular well. And that's really important because if you want to protect the water quality, particularly if it's a municipal well, you want to know, you want to protect the area where the water is coming from. And so that is what's here called the capture zone. And notice here that because the groundwater is flow is somewhat vertical, that capture zone might not be exactly at the well. It might be upgrading of the well. And so I just put together a simple diagram of one of the Fitchburg wells just to show you what one looks like. We simulated all of these about 10 years ago. And again, pumping rates may have changed and land use may have changed, so they may not be relevant anymore. But I think the utility has these maps. But let's look at this well along Lacey Road. There's a well, I think it's Fitchburg 11 is at that green dot here. And we simulated the zones of contribution where the water is coming from that well over for different travel times. So here are the simulated zones of contribution or travel times for 5, 10, or 50 years. So you can see that within 5 years, the water will be coming from that smaller circle. 10 years, it's coming from that circle plus that more ellipse. And if you went up to 50 years, it's coming from that larger ellipse. So a couple of things to note here. First of all, this is probably not as far as you might have thought. Groundwater moves slowly. It only moves a few feet a year. So this makes sense with what we know about groundwater flow, that the groundwater to these wells is not coming from that far away. That's a powerful idea because it means that if you want to protect that well, this is the area you need to protect for that particular well. But it also means that that's the vulnerable area. So if you want to understand where the water's coming from and how to protect the land, you need to understand how the well is, where the water is coming from for that particular well. In this case, it's pretty good because a lot of that area is low density and much of it is a park. So that's actually not a bad situation.
So Ken, if that area became a developed residential area, would it affect the zone of contribution then?
Well, not unless you really change the infiltration somehow. That could change it. Or what would change this?
If you had more impervious area in that area.
The impervious area, or if you started pumping, this is really sensitive to the pumping rate of the well. So if you pump the well more, the zone of contribution gets larger. If you pump it less, it gets smaller. But what you don't want to do is put a landfill here or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And I assume that all these subdivisions are on sewer. So you want to make sure the sewers are good shape. You don't want to have them probably on septic tanks. So some things like that. And you probably don't want to put a rock quarry there. The land use that's there now is pretty protective, I think. Okay, I think that's my last slide. So I just finished up there, and I wasn't sure what your interests were completely. So this is a general overview, but I'm happy to answer any questions or pursue any other topics that you have right now.
That was a great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
We've always enjoyed the survey. We've always enjoyed working with Fitchburg and have had a good relationship. But we haven't, since our model was finished, we haven't really done much. But again, I'm retired now. I retired last July from the survey, so I'm not there anymore. But people that are there would certainly be willing to work with the city on groundwater problems.
So Ken, just in terms of groundwater flow under the city of Fitchburg, essentially moves from west to east towards Lake Wabisa?
In general, yes.
Okay.
So aside from, I think thinking about well casing and making sure that they're engineered correctly, what other topics do you feel like you often see when you think of municipality considerations or just groundwater considerations, with the current state of development and other, human changes you're seeing to some of these aquifers?
Well, there's more drawdown. I mean, the impact on surface water. We take our surface water fairly seriously. I know you all do. That's why you're on this commission. And in the past, we've worked. Fitchburg had a lot of, a lot of questions about where they should put their new wells. And I don't know if there's any new wells built recently, but 10 years ago, there were, development was happening. They needed more water, and they were trying to decide, where should a well go? And you really need to do more than just say, oh, well, look, we have a vacant lot here. Let's just put the well there. It really matters hydrogeologically where you put the well, how it's going to impact other wells, and how it's going to impact local surface water bodies, because you don't want to be drying up the fish hatchery. You don't want to dry up the springs at Nine Springs. Understanding the hydrogeology is important for municipal well siting, and also understanding how wells might interfere with each other, because it's not efficient to have two wells, because wells are very expensive things, to put a couple of wells in and have them be basically competing with each other for the same water. That's not an efficient design. So those are kind of engineering things, but other things that come to mind are the questions I get all the time are all about contamination, about nitrate or PFAS, which I frankly don't know a lot about, but it's certainly in the news a lot. Or waste spills of various things, and how to prevent that from getting into the deep aquifer. In these urbanizing areas, we have a big change. A lot of changing land use, and a lot more contamination or potential contamination sites than we used to have.
Great. Well, thank you again for your presentation. It was really, really great.
Oh, well, thank you for your interest. I'm
Yeah,
glad it seemed appropriate to you.
Yeah, is there a way we could get a copy of this presentation, or
Sure,
send it to Ben?
I'll make a PDF of it. Should I send
Okay.
it to Ben or somebody?
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
send it to me. That'd be great.
Yeah,
Okay,
that would be cool.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Ken.
Okay, good
Thanks.
night,
So
everyone.
much, Ken.
All right, good night. Okay, moving on to other items under old business. Ben, if you want to give a recap of the Fall Cycling Day event. Oh, Gabriella's here. Hi, Gabriella.
Whoops, sorry. Yeah, it was a good event. We had many of us were at the event. So I think the totals were, we had over 10,000 pounds of electronics recycling, about 2.3 tons of paper, confidential paper shredding, and then about 100 pounds of unwanted medication.
Wow.
Yeah. So while it was interesting, this year we kind of, I think, talked about maybe not promoting the med drop as much, since it's open year round year round. But I think that was about as high of a med drop total as we'd gotten.
Yeah. Do we know what the average daily weight is of the med drops?
No, that's a good question.
Yeah.
That'd be something good to know.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody probably weighs it.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, outside of the totals, I think it went pretty smooth. Couple ideas just for advertising in the future. I was thinking the recycling center as a kind of an obvious place to advertise. Just put it on that electronic sign that they got out there. There's kind of been continued discussion about the potential for a different location. I don't know if that had been discussed at an RCC meeting at all. I think there's the McGaw Park was brought up. So that's just something to maybe think about. it seemed like it went really well.
Yeah,
So I don't think there were any traffic issues, although I was in the back kind of. But
Yeah, I would say from the many years that I've helped to direct traffic, this was probably the smoothest it's ever been. And I think a lot of it had to do with how we placed the cones. So people, turning into the paper shredding first couldn't sneak through. And so I think over the years, we continue to learn and how to improve the traffic flow, but it went very smoothly this last time.
great.
yeah,
I was surprised by the quantity that was collected because the lines never got to the point that they were in spring or last year. I mean, the lines for the e-cycling were almost out of control last year at this time. So we still collected quite a bit, and I thought you did a nice job organizing it, and it went very smoothly.
yeah,
It was
great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
yeah.
Ben, one question I had was there were a couple people I talked to that were wondering about recycling batteries. And one of the staff workers that I talked to about it, he said he directed people to dropping them off at the airport by the recycling center out there. That's what he suggested they do with their batteries because, like he said, they're not able to transport them. But I was just wondering if we've ever been able to do that. Like, what's the reason why we can't transport them?
Yeah, so from what I understand, they did in the past, but the batteries really are supposed to be prepared, but putting tape basically on the ends. So there's just a concern with basically a fire hazard with transporting batteries if they're not all properly. And someone could throw in a battery that, who knows what kind of
Shape
conditions it had been subjected to prior to being dropped off. So I think it's just a liability thing. They don't want to take batteries that they don't know where they're coming from in a car. But yeah, the Resource Solutions has a facility by the airport. So yeah, I guess they'll take them there, but they just don't want them in their vehicles.
Resource Solutions will take alkaline batteries?
I don't know about alkaline, but
They will at their location. I think a lot of it is about whether or not all the electrodes are correctly covered too, because if they can make contact with each other, that's where you start to get some of more of the discharge and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I know they'll take it at their location, and I just looked this up the other day. You can take them to Batteries Plus, but they do charge like a rate per pound of recycle.
Yes.
It would be nice to put that on the website because we did have some people that brought. I'm glad you brought that up, Will, because there were a couple of people that asked me about recycling batteries at that event, and City Hall used to collect them, and that became prohibitively expensive and uncontrollable. And then for I think 2 years, we had Resource Solutions. We paid them to collect batteries from Fitchburg residents. But my understanding was the funding wasn't included, or it wasn't included in the contract in the spring. And so for this whole year, they haven't collected them. But if they do collect them at their garage, let's just get that word out.
Sure.
My understanding, I just took a look at the 2023 budget. We budgeted $2,500 for battery recycling for this coming fiscal year. So I don't know.
That's not nearly what it was costing us.
Yeah, I don't know what that was listed as a new initiative. So I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to flag it. I don't know. It looks like it's in the budget according to what I saw, and it wasn't removed during the process. So
that was 2,500 or 25,000.
2,500.
Okay.
Diane, doesn't that seem like a holdover number from past budgets that they were allotting for it, and then we couldn't?
Well, I remember that Phil said there wasn't any money for this year, And it seems to me when we had the budget discussion, we talked about adding money for next year, but I don't think 2,500 does much. I mean, when we were paying to send them in the boxes out, it was just astronomically expensive. But maybe, Ben, you could
It says-
check with.
It's listed as a new initiative for 2023 in the Public Works Refuse Division. It says new
Yeah.
initiative under the
What-
broadband drop-off notes or battery recycling. So maybe maybe we're going to develop it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that it would be nice, a nice service to provide. And I mean, people don't know where to get rid of their batteries and we just take them. Something I think it would be worth exploring again and seeing if there's it's tough having the drop off, just people dropping off batteries because you can't enforce the preparation of it with capping the ends. But I still think, it's something to look into. If there's some way we could come up with a safe way for people to dispose of their batteries.
I mean,
Could
so
we
you look,
could we pay Resource Solutions to take them at City Hall if they're properly prepared?
I believe so, but the problem was, I think, we'd have staff spending time going through the buckets of batteries that were dropped off and capping them.
No, I mean during our e-cycle event.
Oh, I asked about that. They just don't want to take them. They don't want the risk of the improper preparation, putting them in the vehicles.
I mean, I will say the City of Madison Streets Division has a pretty comprehensive page on this where they literally show people how to tape them up. They talk about all these rules. So like if we wanted to explore this, there are some good examples locally of how they've demonstrated to people, like if you want to do this for free, or if this is a priority, this is how you do it. So just something to put out there.
Yeah, Josh, I've seen that before. I know Brian Johnson has talked about that, even possibly with this commission before. I think that City of Madison, if I remember correctly, has a staff person
Yeah, they do.
that helps out with that and checks
Yeah,
on the
yep.
batteries, like literally like one by one, and we just have not gotten to that point. And
It
certainly,
does make sense. I mean, I will say, I think it's something that, especially since this committee volunteers so much at that event, that if part of that budget was going towards a whole bunch of packaging tape and we were helping individuals prep batteries, I mean, I think it might be something we would want to explore with Resource Solutions, just to say, if we could commit on those 2 days a year to having people help prep these, would you be open to
Sure.
helping us offer that service?
If we had a dedicated person, a volunteer on that day that they just wrap batteries, I think, that sounds reasonable.
Well, I think we should be clear if we say that we accept batteries, that they need to be wrapped. And
Yes,
so
I
then
agree.
Yeah.
Staff can just be on staff
Inspection.
meaning volunteers can just be on hand for the people that didn't follow the rules.
Well, or inspection, right? I think we can
Yeah.
reject battery collection that is not correctly wrapped. Somebody just needs to be dedicated to checking what people are bringing in, and then if it's wrapped, great, and if it's not, either come back that day or come back the next time, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even if we had a flyer too that showed how to properly wrap it, because what would happen is when people were coming through, they'd be like, oh, I can recycle electronics. I'm going to go back home and come back. So, that could also be a situation where if somebody comes in and they have a battery and they didn't wrap it, correctly, we hand them a flyer and they either come back through or they wait till the fall or the spring.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, let's pursue that for April.
Yeah. Okay.
you like that idea.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, thank you, Ben, on the update. Diane, agenda 5C, under old business, the Fitchburg Star articles for 2023.
Okay, just want to tell you that we're 7 minutes behind.
Okay,
Ben's writing an article on holiday recycling for the December star. So we need people to sign up for next year's articles. Again, we committed to 9 this year. Actually, we wrote more than that, and that's great. I have a couple of ideas that I'll throw out, and if you could just email me with your topic and when you think you might like to write the article. March. We probably won't do an article in March because of the April election. They usually have too many ads and they don't have a space for an article. But I was thinking we haven't really done, a while back we did healthy lawns, healthy lakes. And I was thinking we could do healthy lawns, healthy lakes, healthy environment, and just talk about pesticides on grass. And you might remember an email I sent around about Mosquito Joe spraying for mosquitoes, which also kills a lot of unintended items. So I was thinking, that might be a topic somebody wants to tackle. Could also have an article on earth-friendly alternatives to common household items. Something that I've just recently become aware of, recently meaning the last half of the year, is toilet paper made from bamboo. I don't know if any of you have tried that. Well, actually I do know. I know that Kim has tried it. And I have some waiting to be opened. So I'm ready to try it. But there are many products like that people might not be aware of, that they might be interested in doing. I mean, bamboo is fast growing and sustainable and much better than, they've made many improvements, and I'm told that this is a much better alternative than what used to be recycled paper and was kind of scratchy and uncomfortable. That might be a little too much information for you, but anyway, there are lots of products out there that are earth friendly that maybe people don't realize. Those are a couple of ideas that I've thrown out. Anything that you're interested in writing about, just let me know. I still plan on writing about what happens to recyclables once they're picked up at the curb, and a sustainable diet, which I talked about earlier, a meat-free day. I still plan on writing those 2 articles. So we need a January article. If somebody's interested and willing to commit to January, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm going to have to draft somebody. And then if you could just email me with your thoughts and ideas for 2023, that would be great.
I'll volunteer to do the January one. I'll let you know what it's going to be.
Great. Thanks, Ron.
Have we ever done like a digest of ways that citizens could get involved in or volunteer for environmental stuff? I mean, it could be a little self-serving in the fact that we could advertise kind of some of our regular events, but then we could also do kind of a digest of just a number of the environmental groups in the area and different ways that they could either volunteer or get involved.
We've never done that, and I think that's a great idea. Good. Are you suggesting that that's what you're gonna write about?
I'd be happy to write about it. I don't know if I can commit to January, but I'd be more than happy to write about that or in one of the early months in the spring, so that people can look at getting involved in the warmer months.
We could do that in April and combine it with our let's see, the waterway cleanup is probably going to be happening before the star comes out in April, but we could do that in April and combine it. Well, it's Earth Month, so that would be a perfect topic.
Sure. Happy to commit to that.
All right, thanks, Diane.
I could probably do an article, in February too, if we're thinking about this water event. Potentially something, that kind of rolls into that water event in February.
We might have to juggle a little bit, Chris, when you decide on a date for the February event. We just need to make sure that the star, like I just got the star, I think today's Monday, in Saturday's mail. So we might have to have you and Ron switch places, but let's put Ron down now for January and Chris for February. Okay. good. And then probably in February, I'll bug some other of you. But Ben, you're off the hook because you've written 2 in a row.
Yeah.
Good, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Diane. Okay, let's move on to agenda 5D, holiday recycling guide discussion. Ben, I know you shared it as part of our package.
Yep. So, well, we just talked about batteries.
Batteries, yeah.
I think this could use a little bit of work. I think adding a little bit more, like Diane said, including resource solutions, having them, including where to recycle it. There's a lot of different kinds of batteries as well. Not all places will take the same kind of batteries. So that's one definitely can update. Yeah, and I don't know if you guys thought of any, what do people have around the holidays?
So I think this is
I was
great, by
thinking
the way.
about like food waste maybe or something, and talking about composting food waste was one thing I had thought of. But yeah, just wanted to hear some thoughts.
You mean for your article?
Oh, for the screen, are you seeing the holiday recycling guide? Are you seeing that right
Yes,
now?
I am. But are you asking for our thoughts for your article?
Oh, no. Just anything
Oh.
else you'd like to see on the holiday recycling guide, if there are any, feel anything's missing or, just any, I guess, thoughts.
Can you confirm the tissue paper one? I swear I've looked that up in the past and it couldn't be recycled.
Which is that?
Like tissue paper, like the stuff in the gift bags or whatever. I thought that couldn't be recycled because of how it was produced.
That's what I've been told also.
Okay, I'll take a look at that.
But aside from that, I really love this. I love the calling it out for the time of year and collecting it, because I think this is one of the biggest, more challenging times for citizens to know how to get rid of this stuff.
And
Yep,
Ben, if you just, maybe just including this, I don't know if they would accept this as an article, but if there's room in the Star, putting this on the city's page, both in English, and then the Star does, part of theirs is in Spanish anyway. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I'll see if they'd be willing to get that in.
And I also think, as part of our outreach efforts, from our outreach committee, a lot of us have access to the neighborhood associations. Like I post stuff on the Quarry Hill Neighborhood Association. So this would be something I would love to put on our Facebook page, and send out to our citizens as well.
Yeah, same here.
Great, yeah.
Yeah.
Love that idea.
When you have it updated, then Ben, can you circulate that to us, please?
Yes, we'll do. I'll confirm those couple of items.
Okay.
I can't remember who translated this for us, but are you able to have that part adjusted also?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Great.
All right. Thanks, Ben. Next is the 2023 refuge recycling calendar.
Yep, that's me too. And I think I believe we had this up a couple of meetings ago, and we were just looking to finalize a few things from Pelletary and get the Christmas tree pickup date down.
That's done by the city.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. We're just coordinating that with our streets crew.
And does the city still, if a resident comes in to get one of those yard waste bags, does the city still give those out?
I got one the other day.
First one is free, and then I think they're $2.50 for more.
$2, yeah.
$2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I think you're going to be getting some calls because we have people out with loose leaves, and when Pelletary picks up this week, that'll be it, and they won't be picking those leaves up.
Yeah. I guess, that kind of brings up a good question. I have been getting some calls recently, residents asking about yard waste pickup and leaf pickup. I guess what are your thoughts about? We've got.
I was going to come into this meeting and wonder if we want to be putting both of our pickups in November if possible. I mean, are they typically trying to spread them out? Are we trying to? I think this year the timing was really unfortunate where I feel like everybody missed the first one and now everybody's relying on this last one kind of thing.
But that's not necessarily bad because all the leaves are down now. So when they come by this week, that'll be it. I mean, in the past, we've had people, and it actually in my neighborhood, I've seen people put out yard waste at the beginning of October. So I think it's just to sort of divide and conquer.
I think it's just hard as somebody who tries to reuse my bags and my bins that I've just gotten one crack at them this year, right? And so it's like, to me, I think it just amplifies the use of single-use bags so much if you're relying on kind of that everything has to happen in the last pickup.
That brings up another thing, not to change the subject, but just temporarily. When we had Pelletieri join us for the meeting, I asked him if Pelletieri was going to invest in a vacuum truck, and I thought, Ben, that he was going to talk to the powers that be to see if they had made if they were planning on doing that.
Yeah, now that you bring that up, I did get a response from him. I'll share that. I'll share that with the group.
I mean, I'll be honest. The next time the RFP comes around, dedicated equipment for brush and leaf is going to be one of my biggest questions because I do think that their scale has gotten so big, and in terms of the numbers of municipalities they support, that I don't think they can make that argument anymore. And this is not the system that any other municipality uses. And so other than who they're covering. And so I think we really need to reassess the service that it's providing to the citizens and if there's an actual environmental impact by the fact that my neighborhood is just covered in single-use plastic bags that are all going to get thrown away this week.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And, I think that's something, I don't know if there's any other vendors or haulers that have I think it's all the municipality themselves own the vacuum. I think even in like Jefferson and Mount Horeb, it's not even a very sophisticated piece of machinery. It's like something that they drag on the back of a old trailer and suck the leaves out. So I mean, maybe I guess, yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe that's something that the city could invest in.
That was one of my other questions too, is if we've ever explored from a municipal perspective, because I think it would make, I'll be shocked if they can get through everybody this week, because I think the load is going to be so immense for how much it's backloaded this fall. And I think that the city could provide just so much better of a service and actually get that dedicated equipment. Plus, we're taking so much of it from that drop-off site because I think there's been a lot of confusion. I mean, I was there this week and the amount of yard waste there is a ton. I mean, I'm sure it is this time of year every year, but part of me wonders if, I think it's a conversation that should be had.
Great. Yeah, I will add that on future conversations. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Ben. We can move on to agenda item 6, which is council update. Gabriella, I'm sure there's a lot to report from the exciting meeting you had last week, budget meeting.
Yes. Budget meeting was last week. Yeah. And all good news on that front. So our 20422, which was allocating $25,000 in this year's budget to the sustainability plan, that passed unanimously. That's staff vacancy funding. So there actually we didn't even require a budget amendment for it. Meaning we just needed a simple majority. We didn't need a 2/3 vote. but it did pass unanimously. So now we have 50,000 total for the sustainability plan.
Great.
Right now, but obviously the RFP probably won't go out till next year, once Phil finalizes it. But I do think that 50,000 is a lot to work with. I think that'll give us a lot more community engagement, and maybe some youth engagement and things like that are going to take more from a consultant. So that's exciting. And then the budget, number 8, amendment number 8 passed, sustainable vegetation and street medians. That passed 7-1. So the city forester is going to look at what potential options are for changing out sustainable vegetation. And we're going to try to pilot that next year, depending on how far that money goes. It's $10,000 total. And then number 9 passed as well. That's additional money for the Swamp Creek monitoring station. That passed unanimously. So we're going to have phosphates and nitrate sampling going forward. And I do anticipate that will be maintained going forward. It's not typically something that's removed from the budget later on, but obviously we'll keep an eye on that. But lots of good sustainability news coming out of the budget.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Anything
Thanks,
else?
Gabriella.
I think that's all I had. It's been other than that, I think it was pretty uneventful for council. So
Yeah.
it's a lot in on the budget for the last meeting. So
Glad I'm not on the teen center committee.
Chris, were you clapping your hands? Is that what I saw?
Yeah,
Yeah.
can't see me.
but yeah, I think we'll talk a lot about the sustainability plan going into next year. I'm very excited about the prospect of that. I guess one other note is that Phil and I both did attend the Growing Sustainable Communities Conference
Oh, yeah.
back in October. And it was really, really very interesting. I haven't really had a chance to kind of like go through my notes and digest everything, but there's a lot of good ideas in there and potentially things I want to look at for the CIP. And that's a kind of conference where I'm hoping to maybe go again in the future. But yeah, it was fantastic. And I think there'll be some ideas coming out of that, but I don't have anything very specific to report other than it went well. And we actually I heard from some consultants that do sustainability planning. They talked a little bit about their process, and it was interesting to kind of hear the perspective of somebody that actually does that type of consulting. We also have some people that we can send out the RFP to as well, and ask them to bid on it. So we have some more list of names that we can send it out to, which is good. So yeah, lots of good stuff. I'm looking forward to next year.
Great. Well, thank you for all you did to help get these things passed for us.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay, staff and agenda item number 7, staff and commissioner update. Ben, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so solid waste, kind of got through the annual audit for the tax billing. So just looking at all the properties that Pelletary is serving and making sure that people are getting billed appropriately. And then I just added this little thing on, I'm trying to complete like a little redesign of really the solid waste and some of the stormwater stuff. I think even myself, I just have a hard time finding stuff. It just is a little cluttered. There's a lot of, a bunch of links you have to click to get to somewhere. So that's, I guess, just one thing to kind of work on or been trying to work on.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
I think a lot of people would agree that it's a little bit cluttered or hard to find stuff. So yeah.
Hey, Ben or Gabriella, what was the final the solid waste cost?
Oh, yes. I forgot to mention that. I'm sorry. Can I go back?
Sure. Yeah. Or Ben might know too. So
the proposed it's the higher rate was what was it was passed at the council meeting, the previous council meeting to the budget, and then it was accepted as part of the budget. So the rate was 228. So it was a 6% increase, and that was supported by the council. I did express, I pointed out how much it's increased over the last 4 years, because there's this big jumps multiple years. And so I talked about that. I expressed with the council, with the committee, I expressed and said that we really need to take a hard look at, and that's something that as a committee too, we'll need to do is take a hard look at the services going forward when we do our contract with Pelletary, because costs that this just isn't sustainable long term. And the council definitely responded to that, but ultimately the votes were there to pass it at the higher rate.
Okay,
Can we
thank you.
discuss that earlier? Ben, can you put that on our calendar of events so that we
Okay.
discuss it? You can have your conversation with Misty before you come to RCC, and then we can, before it goes to council.
Yeah,
please.
we can get that in September for sure.
Yeah, we
All
have
right.
it there now for September.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Stormwater update. So we've got a public information meeting scheduled for the Dunn's Marsh flood study. That's going to be at the Boys and Girls Club on November 30th. So that study's well on its way. Same with the Seminole Glen study. We're looking to get a date. We're probably not going to get it before the holidays here, so that'll probably be later in January for those two studies. As far as construction goes, phase 1 of the Sherrill Drive Stormwater Improvements Project is just about wrapped up. So we'd expect to see it complete either tomorrow or Wednesday. They're just doing some landscaping stuff at this point. The majority of the work was completed. So that project will be on hold until it starts again in the spring for phase 2. And then we got some new educational signs, the burn pond and the Terravessa infiltration areas. So beginning those 2 signs installed this year yet. Those are just a couple things. Sustainability, we've got, I'll just read this from Bill.
Before you move on past stormwater, can I say a couple things?
Yes.
By the way, the street sweeper went past and the timing was perfect, at least in our neighborhood. Got the leaves before we got that big rain. So I thought that was great. Just wondering, did you find out whether we can get a wrap for the new street sweeper? I think you were going to check to see if there were dollars left.
Yeah, we'll be able to, but we can do that next year. Cause I think it'd be cool to have basically what Claudia kind of did with that competition.
Okay.
And just have another one of those.
Maybe, Chris, we could combine that with an event at the Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Great idea.
And the other thing, this is also related to stormwater. You might recall that I, in a moment of weakness, offered to contact the MMSD to do and the chamber to get MMSD to do a presentation to the chamber. Claudia suggested this, so this predates you, Ben, that MMSD do a presentation to the chamber about salt wise and the importance of minimizing salt on sidewalks and parking lots. And that has been more than an uphill climb. And I turned it over to Bill Bill Balke, because Public Works has to give an annual report that involves that anyway. And since have been in contact, MMSD was nice enough to follow up with me because she was wondering if she could, I started doing this, trying to get her on the schedule a year ago, September. And the chamber didn't have any time available. And then they stopped
Really?
responding to me. To make a long story a little bit short, I finally contacted via Bill, contacted Joyce in CETA, right? And she said that she didn't think that this really applied to the chamber members. She had a conversation with the chamber CEO and or president, I don't know what her title is, and they didn't think that their members would be interested in. Maybe if we did a little video and if their members showed interest, then they could have a presentation. And at that point, I'm pretty sure MMSD was totally frustrated, and I don't know where it sits now, but it's just wanted to give you an update. It's out of my hands. And I don't think that MMSD is going to be able to, I don't understand what hoops you have to jump through to do a presentation to the chamber, but they were not receptive.
Okay. Well, I still think maybe that idea of just having a kind of a targeted presentation, it's still a good idea. Maybe not to the chamber, but I don't know if there's a different avenue that could be explored. I don't know, something that I guess continue to think about, and I'll touch base with Joyce to see if there was any movement. See if she knows, maybe we just need to tailor it differently. I don't know. I'll check into that.
Yeah, I suspect maybe there's a little lack of understanding, but when they don't respond to my emails, it's kind of hard to make that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Thanks.
All right. Sustainability, in the packet, there's just a little blurb from Phil. So Fact TV, it's got some basically upgraded some stuff. So they're going to get some better energy efficiency. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the ECN, so energy conservation measures. I'm not exactly sure what they upgraded. So it looks like
that was one of the retro commissioning suggestions, because it was getting really hot in there, and their HVAC system was integrated with City Hall, and it was just too difficult to control. They needed to keep things cold for the equipment, and anyway, that has to do with a retro commissioning suggestion.
okay.
My question on Phil's report is, are those annual cost savings, that figure, that 47, I think it was 47,000? I don't have that up right now.
Yeah, the $46,777. It says annual energy savings.
No, my understanding of it was that the 46,777 was the cost of making the changes.
Oh, add a total cost.
Yeah.
Give an estimated annual energy cost savings of $7,849. So it's the $7,850 that would be the annual
Thanks.
savings. And then the sustainability plan RFP, did you see that? Did you guys get that from Phil?
I haven't seen it.
No? Okay.
Nope.
Yeah, if we get a copy of that would be great.
Yep, we'll get that out to you.
Well, he's still on paternity leave, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we probably
Just
won't
went
get
on,
that
yeah.
till he gets back.
Well, there's a draft sitting somewhere that we can get to you.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That's all I got.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
We have 4 minutes.
All right, so just one thing I want to do, I want to thank the Lake Wabisa Conservation Association is applying for a surface water grant to do a lake management plan for Lake Wabisa, which will be one of the first lake management plan done for the 4 major lakes on the Yahara chain of lakes, which is good. But I want to thank Ben for getting the mayor to write a letter of support for the Lake Wabisa Conservation Association to go to DNR. So I appreciate that. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hopefully once the lake management plan is approved, they can actually go after implementation grants. Hopefully can get some funding to help with that Swan Creek monitoring station.
Yep, exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Ben, I am absolutely amazed and so impressed by how fast you've gotten on board. I mean, there's been a lot going on, and you just jumped in the middle, and kudos to you.
Well, thank you. It's been a blast.
Good. So just a final note, Ben, just to get to us the draft 2020 annual report, so we can look at and edit in it, as well as the calendar events for 2023 as well.
Yep, Word docs, got it.
Okay.
And then give us a date by when you'd like it back.
Okay.
And our next meeting is in January, and we'll have Thanksgiving and the holiday season in December. So hopefully everyone will have an enjoyable holiday season and a good Thanksgiving.
We'll see you
Thank
all
you.
in January. Maybe we'll be in
Yeah.
person then.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool.
yeah. I think we should. I mean, these are nice. You get to stay at home, but it'd be nice to be in person. Get back to the same
Absolutely.
routine you had before.
We'll plan for in-person one next year.
Okay.
Make it happen.
Anything else anybody else has? Nope. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And we're actually a little bit early, so that's great. So meetings are
Thank you.
adjourned at
Thank you.
8:55.
Thanks.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays, everyone.
So.
Happy
Bye.
holidays.
Bye.
Too.